Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. Today is February 19th, 2017. Today's episode is titled, It's a Schoolyard Brawl. This is episode 153 of On the Move with Mac Worley. I, of course, am your host, Mac Worley III. So I'm really looking forward to today's show. We've got a whole lot of stuff that I want to talk about. First, let's go ahead and dive into the featured topics. I'll give you a heads up of what we're going to be talking about on today's show. I want to talk about fake news and media bias. Also, are Americans getting fatigued by the news cycle? I didn't get a chance to talk about this last week, so this week we'll definitely talk about it. Radicals on both sides who want to blow up the system. Who are the players? I'm going to spell it out for you. Then I also want to play a clip, if we have time, about Bernie Sanders. He said that Donald Trump is a pathological liar. I want to play that clip and tear it apart. Also, Miami-Dade County rescinds sanctuary status over Trump's threat to withhold federal funds. We'll cover that if we have time as well. University of Wisconsin student government demands free tuition for black students. We got that and much more. Also in the second hour at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be joined by Mark Delphine. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for those of you on the East Coast. And we're going to talk about all sorts of things. I want to talk about Trump. I want to talk about this Milo Yiannopoulos, that fellow. You know the one. And the free speech movement or lack thereof. And anyway, Mark Delphine is going to be joining me then to have this discussion. So, first and foremost, I received a couple of questions last show on the same subject. So since I got the same thing, I figured I'd go ahead and answer this question to everyone. So we're going to go ahead and enter into an Ask Mac segment. Here we go.
It's time to ask Mac. You got a question burning in your head. He's got the answer. Time to ask Mac.
All right. So if you have a question, something on your mind, please feel free to give us a call. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. You got anything on your mind at all, even if it's not a question, comment, concern, gripe, whatever it is, hit us up, 360-450-5625, 360-450-5625. So I had some questions last week about why I took the time at the beginning of the show to say that this was an opinion show, that you're tuning in, and FYI, if you're new to the show, I'm going to give you the same spiel I gave last week. If you're new to the show, we talk about all sorts of things on this show. We talk about government, liberty, we talk about philosophy, guns, standard politics. And if you're tuning in, I make it clear you are getting my perspective, which, by the way, is a libertarian perspective with some conservative leanings. So I make my bias completely and 100% clear from the beginning, that you're getting the news and politics of the day through the prism of a libertarian with conservative leanings. This is what I'm providing here for you. So I don't have an issue with bias, and this is why I mentioned it last week. Everyone has a bias. There's no such thing as an unbiased journalist. They're all coming at it from a different perspective. Some people's bias may be to try to find the truth. Some people's bias may be very little. Some people may have a whole lot of bias. So all I try to do is commit to the truth. This is all I want to do, is commit to the truth and to facts, not alternative facts, not propaganda. I'm not trying to spin anything or carry water for any particular side so I fit my worldview, or that I can present you an image of a worldview that you think fits into this little mold that you've cast for yourself. I don't want to build an echo chamber. That's not what this is ever going to be about. So I'm just trying to remain intellectually consistent. And from my point of view, I look at the world and what the government is doing and apply it through natural law, what I believe the government ought to be doing, and that's the lens. This is the lens that I give my opinion based on, and I make that fact known. So for those of you out there who are concerned and confused, why I was talking about how it's an opinion show. Look, the show is still based on facts. I'm committing myself to the truth, which is what I would hope that all newscasters, journalists, or everyday citizens would commit themselves to the truth. The problem is right now we have agendas on both sides. From Donald Trump, obviously his administration itself has an agenda, as every other administration in history. So it's not a problem. He has an agenda. This is what he should be doing, and he's going to be critical of the stuff that contradicts with his agenda. So keep that in mind. He'll call things that he doesn't like fake news, although the media, they're not really helping themselves. They just had a fake news story. The AP ran with a story this week about how Trump was going to activate 100,000 National Guards to go around and deport illegal immigrants. 100,000 National Guard. Turns out not true. Not true. So the AP, they're the ones that released that story. The media, they're just trying to find any kind of thing that they can throw at this administration, any kind of bad news to control this news cycle, to make it a losing news cycle for this week. And Donald Trump is doing his best to control the news cycle for the news week as well. He's every time he wakes up and tweets in the morning, he's controlling the news cycle. But it's important that we understand what the bias that we're receiving is. The problem with CNN, with the AP, other than the fact that they have clear liberal bias, and I mean modern liberal bias, not classical liberal bias, and there's a huge distinction to be made there. But we'll have to talk about that again on another day. My issue is that they don't, not only do they have these biases, but they try to act like they don't. And I think we all should be clear about the biases that we have, and we should understand biases of the people that we're receiving our information from. So, look, I don't think that CNN is a fake news network. I don't think that the AP is a fake news network. I don't think that these are purposefully always fake. However, I think in some of these instances, the media in and of itself, they're looking for an angle to make anybody look bad that they don't like or that goes against their agenda. And they're also very quick to jump on and not check sources on these things. This is not the first time. However, they're damaging their credibility because, number one, the news that they're reporting sometimes is actually fake. And it's like they're falling right into Donald Trump's trap. He calls them fake news. They send fake news, and it's making it even worse. So it's interesting. You know, a year ago, we weren't saying fake news, fake news, fake news. This wasn't happening. This term has become almost pervasive now into our language because of Donald Trump. And this is a war against the media. Donald Trump versus the media. He had like a 90 or 80 minute speech that he gave. I don't know if any of you can make it through that. I personally couldn't watch the whole thing. It was tough to watch. And then how the media picked out a couple points here and there to slam him on, like how he was questioned by an African-American reporter about how he didn't have anybody from the Black Congressional Caucus, or that he needed to talk with them or something along those lines. And he said, do you know them? And you want to set up a meeting, and people flew off the handle. Oh my God, Donald Trump is racist. He assumed that a black person knew another black person. Well, guess what? Turns out she actually did know, and immediately said, following that question, that she did know a couple of them. So, number one, she did know. Number two, he's empowering these people to set up a situation and set up a communication like she wanted. She asked for it. He said, yes, I'd love to set one up. Do you know them? Set it up if you can. So I don't have any problem with this. I think the media just blows things up, and they're trying to make things look worse than they really are and make Donald Trump look like a racist, which I don't believe that Donald Trump is racist. I think it's something that should be on our radar and keep an eye out, but I don't think that he's racist. And I think it really does take away a lot of credibility from the media by continuing to slam this drum. He's a racist. He's a Nazi. He's Hitler. I think it's taking away credibility from the media. And moreover, this Never Trump movement, and it's not even calling itself Never Trump. By the way, here's a article here that I wanted to get to today. you all may be familiar with Shia LaBeouf. He has this He Will Not Divide Us campaign that's going on. Apparently, it's an artsy schmartsy protest, but it's supposed to be artwork. So I'll read the story. This is on Deadline.com. Article is written by Liz Calvario. This is February 18, 2017. Shia LaBeouf, Luke Turner, Nash Jad, I don't know what this name is. Got a lot of dots above his vowels in his name. No idea how to say that. Creators of the anti-Donald Trump He Will Not Divide Us street art exhibition. Ooh. Have moved their project west after it was shut down by New York's Museum of the Moving Image earlier this week. New York's Museum of the Moving Image. That sounds fascinating. Anyway, in a joint statement on LaBeouf's website, the trio called out the museum for its lack of commitment to the project. As of today, the live streaming protest is taking place outside El Rey Theater in Albuquerque, New Mexico. On February 10, 2017, the Museum of Moving Image abandoned HeWillNotDivideUs.com. By the way, this is a quote here from a letter that they wrote. Their evident lack of commitment to the project is damning, the statement reads. Another quote here. From the outset, the museum failed to address our concerns about the misleading framing of our piece as a political rally rather than as a participatory performance artwork resisting the normalization of division. Oh my goodness. In fact, the museum demonstrated a spectacular lack of judgment and courtesy to us as artists by neglecting to consult us when they staged a political rally at the site of our artwork on January 29, 2017. It continued. On numerous occasions, we voiced our very serious concerns to the museum about hate speech occurring at the site of our project and requested that museum act responsibly in moderating this and providing the public a means of reporting such incidents. Our requests were not even acknowledged, let alone acted upon. Well, first of all, Mr. LaBeouf, I don't know, the guy who played on Even Stevens when he was a kid. Look, first of all, hate speech. This is what is a museum supposed to do about hate speech? As far as I understand, they're conducting this performance art in front of the museum. Let's double check here. The trio called out. Let's go back up here. Have moved their project west. From what I understand, this was in front of the museum. And let's just say, first of all, hate speech is not illegal. You have a right to say hate speech. You have a right to say whatever the hell you want, even if it's abhorrent and it's hateful and it's racist and bigoted. You can be a racist. You have liberty in this nation and in life to be a bigot. No one can force your heart. No one can change how you feel. And in fact, we should encourage people to say their hate speech. If you have hate, say it. That way we know who you are and what you represent. Otherwise, we're over here dealing with people who may hate us and we don't even know about it. So number one, we shouldn't be trying to shut down hate speech, Mr. LaBeouf. But secondly, what is a museum's role? Is there a museum hate speech police officer who's supposed to be going out and shutting people down? This is just fascinating that these guys think that this is a museum's role. And again, a lot of this is also the virtue signaling that typically people in Hollywood and the left and actors and even corporations do. They signal that, oh, we're not on their side. So anyway, we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I actually want to play a clip of Shia LaBeouf going crazy on somebody who was conducting hate speech, essentially. So we'll be right back after this break, and when we come back, we'll start with that clip. Don't go anywhere.
Have you visited the On The Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On The Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On The Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. When we last left, we were talking about Shia LaBeouf. He was talking about his He Will Not Divide Us performance art, protest, rally, something or other. Very complicated process of political protest that he's conducting. The reason why I brought it up was because I'm talking about the things that I think that the media and the left themselves are doing to discredit themselves and potentially make it worse for themselves in the long run here. They are grinding at the American people, and I think their message is not going to resonate with middle America, the flyover country as they refer to it. I happen to live in flyover country, so I take offense to that. But this kind of message is these radical elements continuing to protest every little thing that Donald Trump does and try to make a mountain out of a molehill when there are genuine problems and issues that we can all come together to talk about. Like, for example, no president should be able to have such a dramatic effect on your everyday life. The federal government's checks and balances should be reestablished. We should all be advocating for the filibuster to be reestablished in the Senate. We should be talking about more checks and balances on the federal government and federal power, reducing the size and scope of the federal government. We can easily come together on this. But yet, they don't. Again, we warned them when Obama was in office. You're not going to like it when the next guy gets in office. If it's not your guy, you may think that your guy is not going to turn the key of tyranny to turn the machine of the Leviathan on against you. You may hope that will never happen with your guy, but eventually someone other than your guy is going to get in. And do you really want them to have that ability? I mean, they're learning lessons. By the way, we'll go ahead and just flip to the Miami-Dade story here. Miami-Dade County rescinds sanctuary status over Trump's threat to withhold federal funds. This is an article on theblaze.com written by Chris Anole, February 18, 2017. President Trump has threatened to withhold federal funding from any city, county, or state that has a sanctuary policy in an effort to rein in illegal immigration, and it's worked. On Friday, the Miami-Dade County Commission voted 9-3 to rescind their status as a sanctuary county over worries that the Trump administration would withhold federal funding from the county, according to USA Today. The county reportedly receives $355 million in federal funds each year, and the county desperately needs each cent. However, the vote did not come without controversy and protest, as many decried the vote and shamed Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez, who is Cuban-born immigrant, for the move. More from USA Today. Dozens of people lashed out at Jimenez and the commission, calling his order a betrayal against residents of a county where the majority of people are foreign-born, one by one in English and Spanish, and fighting through occasional tears. Miami-Dade residents pleaded with the commission to vote down the resolution. So here's my thoughts on this. Let me just tell you. I think, first of all, there's going to be a whole hell of a lot more this. There's going to be way more counties, way more cities that are going to get rid of their sanctuary status. There'll be holdouts. Absolutely. There will be people who will, no matter what, because of political agenda and trying to save face and also not wanting to bend the knee to Donald Trump, there's going to be cities and places that will continue their sanctuary status. They may very well lose their federal funds, but there's going to be a lot more, I think, that will capitulate and will start rescinding their sanctuary status, which overall I think is a good thing. I don't think that they should be violating federal law. They should be enforcing federal law. But this, I think, serves as a perfect lesson to the left, that you don't want the federal government to have this much power. Why is the federal government in control of all these federal funds? They take away taxes from the states and then they give them back? How about they just don't take it in the first place? How about that? No president should have this ability to threaten the states with federal funding, because there shouldn't be federal funding. The money is coming from the states anyway. The federal government isn't making money or wealth in any other way other than collecting taxes, and that's not making wealth. That's redistribution of wealth. It's not making any wealth. The money would be best served in the communities that need stuff done in the first place. The money would be better suited in the hands of the people on the ground rather than given to the federal government, who then decides who's going to be the winners and losers in the market, or who's going to get the money, who's going to get the handouts. This is the perfect example, and this is why I think the left is missing a perfect opportunity here to number one, come together with the right, and also have some credibility, have some intellectual honesty. What they're concerned about is the federal overreach. I'm concerned about the federal overreach. We can come together, but we can't come together when Shia LaBeouf is talking about he will not divide us and screaming in somebody's ear like a psychopath. Here he goes.
What's up, y'all? Jinx here for Complex News. If you need any more reason to love Shia LaBeouf, we've got one for you. The actor and sometimes rapper perfectly put a jackass in his place after he attempted to hijack Shia's anti-Trump live stream by
Okay, all right. Sorry. This is I was hoping I'd get the actual clip of him screaming. Let me see here. Screaming. He will not divide us. Here we go. Let's see if I can find this, because he's just losing it. Here we go.
The distance of the white people on He will not divide us! 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 He will not divide!
So he's yelling this right into this guy's ear. And by the way, this guy is the conversation needs to start. This guy is a jerk. The first guy, not Shia LaBeouf. Well, he probably is, but I don't know so much about him. But the guy talking into the camera, into the live stream, he apparently said something that was related to the Nazi movement. I can't remember if it was like HH or 88 or something like that, or Hail Hitler. Something along those lines, a code that these alt-right jerks know about, basically. And he said it directly into the camera. Then Shia LaBeouf comes out and starts screaming into this guy's ear, "He will not divide us. He will not divide us," losing his mind. I really do think that Shia LaBeouf is in the middle of a nervous breakdown.
He will not divide us! 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 He will not divide us!
This is a very weird thing to watch and to see. It's just, the jumping back and forth in his ear, chanting, "He will not divide us." It looks like we're pretty divided there, Shia. This doesn't look like you're bringing anybody together. This certainly doesn't look like unity to me. This looks like screaming people down. And again, this guy who he's screaming at, very likely a racist, very likely alt-right, very likely a Nazi sympathizer, so to speak. But I don't see this being the way to handle that. You answer abhorrent speech with more speech. You call people out. You shame people. But you don't have to shout people down. In fact, I think your message will resonate more if people will if you give them enough rope to hang themselves with, essentially, people don't like this. The vast majority of Americans are not racist. The vast majority of Americans don't hate somebody simply because of their color, creed, national origin, sexual orientation. The vast majority of Americans just don't care. Most of us just want to be left alone. Most of us just want to be left in our lane. You stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. Don't tell me what to do. I won't tell you what to do. Don't come over here and try to hurt me, and I won't hurt you. Essentially following the non-aggression principle, the point that I talk about over and over and over again, the non-aggression principle. And essentially it all boils down to don't hurt others and don't take their stuff. Most people don't care. And again, I think that a lot of Americans are feeling fatigued by this news cycle. Division, division, division. Both sides are swinging. Donald Trump calling CNN, BBC, AP, MSNBC, all of the left-leaning media, essentially except for conservative outlets that agree with him, of course. And other than that, I mean, everything else is fake news. And I think so many Americans here are getting tired, just based on my conversations with everyday people that I talk to, and even my feeling. I feel like I'm getting fatigued. I feel like the election fatigue that we experience every election just hasn't gone away. And if anything, it's amped up. Now we don't know what news we're receiving is real, what news we're receiving is made up. We have to check further into the sources. And the White House is saying that this source is lying, that source is saying the White House is lying. I think so many Americans are feeling fatigued. And as I said, I just don't think that this tactic, and especially that the Democrats are continually now talking about impeachment of Donald Trump. I don't think this is going to work in their favor. I do not think this is going to resonate with everyday, hardworking folks. I think that the people that Donald Trump appealed to, and the people that voted in this election because they thought that it would be the end of America as we know it if Hillary and the Democrats got back into office for another 4 years. I think many of those people are going to continue to be put off by this wild radicalism from the left. And I don't think it's going to resonate like the Tea Party did. And again, I don't even think that this is grassroots activism. This is funded and paid for by George Soros and organized by the same groups that have been on the ground from the beginning. And on the left, you have Black Lives Matter, and this is essentially the same structure or organizational structure for these protests as we saw in Occupy Wall Street and we're seeing now. These are extremely well organized. But is it oversaturation? I think so, and I think Americans are going to continue to feel fatigued by this, and as a result, I think a lot of people are going to check out. And I think they're potentially causing more damage to their cause. Look, when something that there is to freak out with, look, if Donald Trump was throwing people in internment camps, if Donald Trump was legitimately imposing a Muslim ban, which that is not what this is, that's not what he's tried to do. He tried to limit travel, ban travel for a short period of time to 7 countries of concern that were identified under the Obama administration. He's not doing a Muslim ban. Didn't even go after Indonesia, which is the most populated Muslim country in the world. If it was a Muslim ban, that would clearly be something that would be included. Also doesn't include Iraq and Afghanistan. I think it includes Iraq, Afghanistan, and Saudi Arabia. So it's obviously not a Muslim ban. And I will tell you right now, people on the left, I will be the first one to stand with you if there is a genuine Muslim ban, if Donald Trump begins to violate the Constitution, if Donald Trump increases the size of government, I will be critical and I will stand with you. And this is what I think we should be working on together to shrink the size of government. You're afraid of Donald Trump. I understand your fear. I get it. I completely get it. And I promise you, I'm watching. And if he does something legitimate or impeachable, I'm with you. I'm with you, Democrats, if he does something. But so far, we don't have anything yet. He hasn't really done a whole lot yet, which is something that, Republicans should be talking about. Hey, what's he doing? What's going on with Obamacare? What's going on with this wall? If you want the wall, I personally don't. I prefer policies of self-deportation, but I digress. If you want a wall, where's this wall come from? Are we doing that? What's happening? So much more. So many campaign promises that were made. Waiting to see the 75% cut of regulations. Where's that at? Tax reform? Anything? Anyway, but if there's something that we can come together on to ease concerns, because I was feeling this when Obama was in office, and I was concerned about Hillary Clinton getting into office because of the amount of effect that they can have on her life, how strong the presidency has become, how much Congress has made themselves inert in a lot of ways. The president has become more imperial. We should all, doesn't matter what side of the aisle, be calling for more checks and balances on the government. We should be wanting the gears of government to grind slowly along. That's why we have a system of checks and balances. We want divided government. We want to have bipartisan support in order to get something done. I don't want the Republicans to just force stuff down that I want done without any kind of bipartisan support. No one should be able to do that. That's what they did to us. That's what the Democrats did to us. Passing Obamacare without a single Republican vote, saying they're going to do it by crook or by hook, any way possible. They're going to, if we build a wall, they're going to dig under it. If they can't get under it, they're going to pole vault over it. If they can't do that, they're going to skydive in. No matter what, hook or by crook, the ends justify the means. That's not what we're supposed to be, folks. That's not us. And these are the things that we should be coming together. Us on the right, we have a responsibility, I think, to reach out to the people who are concerned on the left and say, look, I understand. I am with you. I understand you're concerned about an all-powerful imperial president that uses the office to violate the rights of people. But first of all, we ought to be clear on what those rights are. Do you have a right to health care? I don't think so. Nowhere in the Constitution does it specify you have a right to someone else's time, money, sweat. Nothing about that in the Constitution. But in regards to denying people a right to vote, and I'm not talking about through ID cards, if putting people in concentration camps, limiting the freedom of the press, or other rights of citizens, other liberties, then yeah, I can come together with the left on that. And I want to let them know that I understand their concerns, because I felt the same way when Obama was in office, and I was concerned about Hillary Clinton getting in office for the same reason. So how about we come together on both sides and say, hey, let's put our differences aside, and instead let's make it impossible for anyone to use the tyrannical force of government against someone. How about that? Just a thought. Anyway, we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to start talking about the radicals on both sides of the system who want to blow it up. So you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. And we're going to be joined here in about 7 minutes by Mark Delphine, good friend of mine. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about free speech and if there is a movement for free speech in this nation. But right now I want to talk about radicals on both sides of the spectrum here that want to blow it up, want to blow up the system. Who are the players? First of all, let's go ahead and play a clip here. Here's a clip with Glenn Beck from The Blaze. He's talking about this very system, this very subject. Sorry, loading the clip here. It's taking a second. This is live radio. This is what happens.
My question is, and I sat here and listened to you this morning, that we had enough. We've had enough. We've had enough in this country. And I sat over the weekend watching how the protesters, how did they get assembled so fast and so rapidly in this country? I know you and George Soros are great buddies.
Oh, so. We're like this.
Yeah,
one of us has a knife for the other's chest. I think that's him.
And when you go back and you look at the Agenda 21, and we look at all these issues that are out there, how can somebody not be considered a terrorist by funding these type of actions that are going on?
Because terrorist is a pretty big word to throw around. He is known as an economic terrorist in many countries. He has collapsed 3 economies. And
this is all true, by the way. He's talking about George Soros. George Soros has actively crashed economies. He loves doing this. He's talked about this, basically laughing at this and at how easy it is to do. And again, reminding you, this is very important. George Soros has said, and he's a globalist. Make no mistake, George Soros believes in a new world order, a global government, and I believe he's actively working toward that end. George Soros has said that the biggest stumbling block to a new world order is the United States. George Soros wants to burn the system down.
And I believe he will be behind the collapse of this one when the time is right and when the ducks are all in a row. He is the major funder behind the radical left. And you're exactly right. How did these people put this together so quickly? I mean, I don't know if you've seen the womensmarch.com website. I mean, when we put 828 together, we struggled. We didn't even know what to do to put a website together. We had no idea. We had to, people started calling us and saying, hey, we're going to bring a bus. And we'd say, hey, could we put your bus on the website? And I mean, it was organic. That website, in a week, had all of the bus routes. They had, Florida at womensmarch.com, Indiana at womensmarch.com. They had all these things that, as somebody who's put these events together with a second job, all of us, when we put those things together. That wasn't that wasn't what we did. We were doing that moonlighting. We didn't have time to do any of that stuff. How did they do that? Lots of money and lots of help. And I will tell you, I am gravely concerned about I think we have two sides that want to blow it up. I think we have Donald Trump does not. I don't believe he wants to blow it up. But Steve Bannon does. Steve Bannon has just been made the president's proxy for the national security meetings. Now, how does that happen? A political advisor in those meetings without the president. And they've just gotten rid of the military advisor. The Joint Chiefs of Staff used to be there. He's out. And so is the head of Intel out. Now, why would you do that? Why would you take military and intelligence out of that meeting? Why? Perhaps because you have a plan. Perhaps. This is me just wargaming. Perhaps because you have a plan that the military, will not say yes to. They won't agree with those things. We want to go, let's just say, we want to go much softer with Russia. The military would say, absolutely not. The intelligence would say, absolutely not. But if it's a political organization, then your National Security Council can say whatever you need it to say. I don't know why that happened, but that's one of the scariest things anyone on my team has seen yet. In September, he said to Vanity Fair...
This is Bannon, Steve Bannon he's talking about. Again, he's on the National Security Council now as a proxy for Trump, apparently. And he's the chief strategist for Trump. It's a created position, a political position for the White House, but it's equal to Reince Priebus now. So here's the rest.
Darkness is good. This is Bannon, chief advisor to our new president. Darkness is good. Darth Vader and Satan. Now that is real power. He has claimed that he is a Leninist, and when they said, you mean you're a Marxist? He said, no, I don't agree with what he was pushing for. I'm a Leninist. I believe what Lenin did to gain power, tear it all down. That is who I am.
So there are people on both sides of the aisle. This is not just the radicals on the left, the communists, the Soroses, the elite billionaires who I believe would like to destroy this system in order to create a global system. And you have it's not just the commies and the socialists on the left. It's not just Black Lives Matter, the Black Panthers, the All African Revolutionary Party. It's not just those, although those are on the left and they would like to destroy. In fact, I've spoken with them and recorded them talking about the complete destruction of capitalism. These people would like to see this system burn, and they want to be there to set it back up again. They want to be the ones to take the reins. They all have their own interest. Black Lives Matter has a different interest than George Soros. George Soros has a different interest than the alt-right. And again, I think that Steve Bannon is part of this alt-right movement. I don't know if he necessarily believes it, but he does believe in destroying the system. He's a Leninist, and he believes in destroying the system of government the same way that Lenin did. So he says he's not a Marxist. My question to you is, if this system is allowed to be destroyed, what comes next? And what does it look like? And what kind of protections to individual freedom do you think will be afforded to us at that point? I don't think that the answer is burning down the system. I think that the answer now is reconciliation and trying to find common interests that we all share in our fears of an overgrown federal leviathan. We can cut back this government. But we have to come together. We have to get past our differences and start talking to each other instead of yelling at each other. Because if we can't do that, if we can't find forgiveness for one another, whether or not we see whether or not this other person is willing to give forgiveness to us, we have to be the first one to extend the olive branch. And look, I'm not saying compromise your values or your principles. I'm saying compromise to find a way to shrink the size of government so that we can all live our lives unmolested rather than burning down the system. Because what's going to be next? This system we have is the best one. It's the best one that's ever been created. It's not perfect. But our founders didn't tell us that they were making us a perfect system. They said a more perfect system, a more perfect union. And they expected us, and in fact, they had hopes for us. They had faith in us to be able to correct the system in the areas that it was failing, in the areas that it wouldn't hold back government power. But we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we do, we're going to come back with Mark Delphine. I'm really excited to have him on. We're going to talk Trump, and we're going to talk free speech. You guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bear Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
This is Dan Sandini of DaylightDisinfectant.com, citizen journalist, friend of the late Andrew Breitbart, and cohort of James O'Keefe. I listen to On the Move with Mac Worley because the only time he's wrong is when he disagrees with me.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. And at this point, we're going to be joined by my good friend and friend of the show, Mark Delphine. Hey, Mark, are you there?
I sure am, Mac. How are you? I'm
doing really good. I'm really excited to talk to you. I know it's been a little while since we talked about Trump in the news and all sorts of other things. So first of all, I just want to check with you. How's things? How you holding up?
Oh, I'm getting better every day. It's kind of like, I lost a loved one, which was what I call America. And, I'm mourning its passing, and then, we're going to kind of wake up to what is coming up that's new, and, still going to work the next day, still trying to fight for the best, but it's a little interesting. I saw some of the headlines that you were talking about when it comes to just the vicious news cycles over and over again, and just seeing all of the things that are going out, good or bad, about this administration, and there's just so much to talk about.
So are you feeling fatigued by the news cycle too? I mean, I think that so many people are right now. How are you feeling?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is, as you know, I mean, I was not a fan of Trump. I wasn't a fan of Hillary either, but just, I was just distraught after the election. And now, I'm trying to kind of pick up the pieces, like I was saying, and to see what is being thrown out there. Now you start to go, who can I trust? What news sources I think are actually viable or trustworthy? What news sources are complete garbage? What is in fact fake news, and how do we define it? And what alternate reality is the president living in, and how are we supposed to keep up? I mean, that's a lot of the fatigue, is just what is reality and what really is just in this guy's head that he can spout off at any given moment.
It's also, I mean, to be fair, it's also the media's fault as well for ruining, I would say, their own credibility in a lot of ways too. Because they have reported some fake news. Now, not all of it is fake, but some of it is fake, like the 100,000 National Guard that were supposedly activated to deport all the illegals here. It's fake news, and the AP reported that without any evidence to back it up.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, here's the thing. I think, we can go into the whole liberal-conservative bias and slant of the media, and there's going to be biased journalists. I mean, everybody has their own bias. You have yours, I have mine. And there's a difference between, an entire news outlet, like, say, the New York Times or the Washington Post, or even, say, something of a little bit more right-leaning like the National Review, and how these journalists have their own bent, they have their own bias, versus an organization that has an actual agenda to get out what type of news they want you to hear, and then to completely manipulate the stories in general, such as, say, a Fox News or, say, a CNN, that it's getting to be that way, where people are not listening to the other side. They're not even daring attempt to learn about anybody that their side has, quote-unquote, deemed to be the enemy. And then when the president himself says, and his right-hand man, Steve Bannon, call the media the opposition party, I understand where he's coming from when it comes to, you just get berated by bad news stories over and over and over again. There's going to be critique, there's going to be criticism, and that's going to be compounded when the president specifically calls out news outlets and says, you guys are the enemy. They're going to take it personal. And so that bias, of course, is going to be translated when they've taken it personally. But there's still no excuse to lose your own integrity and print fake news or print things that aren't real, that aren't having, that don't have sources backed up. And so I understand, and I give Donald Trump a little bit of the credit to, when he's coming in, nobody's ever criticized him on this level, Mac. I mean, I think we both can agree that he's not a big fan of being criticized. Can you agree with that? I mean,
yes.
This is a guy that isn't too happy with that.
I think he's
and
very
whether or not
that's my opinion.
Yeah, and whether or not he has the best of intentions, which I don't believe he does, but even if he did, he still has to know that you're always going to be criticized by the media when you're the president of the United States. Look at Obama's track record over the past 8 years, depending upon what news outlet you looked at. Either he was the Messiah or he was the Antichrist. And, there's somewhere in between, and it's up to us as independent individuals who consider themselves to be intellectual need to decipher not only the source, but also what's really news in this, and what's just supposed to be fodder for people to chew up, and then what's just absolute garbage that we need to leave on the curb.
Yeah. Well,
how do we determine that? That's the question.
Yeah. I mean, the only way that we'll be able to determine that is actually reading the articles and checking the facts and following the news, and not just reading the headlines and going with what we're spoon-fed in that moment. We have to give things a little bit more thought, and we have to fact check. I mean, that's the most important part. But again, to your point, who do you check the facts with? If you can't trust anybody, the issue here is looking to see who's being intellectually consistent and finding the outlets that are doing that. And I think this, any outlet that is committing themselves to intellectual honesty and the truth, I think they're going to pull ahead in this time. And I honestly don't think that we need to have any kind of government intervention or to have the Facebook police filtering out what they deem to be fake news. I think this is something that we, as consumers of news, should be doing. We should be changing the way that we consume news. What do you think about that? Should we be licensing journalists, for example?
Of course not. Absolutely not. That's the definition of a violation of a free press to me. That's the definition of a non-free press. I mean, when you have a state-sanctioned journalist or a government-approved or licensed news outlet, that's the antithesis of a freedom of press, and that violates our First Amendment. And that's why I find this president to be so dangerous. Even though he might have validity in saying that there are a lot of people who pick on him, but his little feelings are not my interest. What my interest is
let me just point out
integrity in news.
It's not just his feelings. And look, I understand. Again, that's your bias, and my bias is as well. I have my own biases, but I think that Donald Trump, in some ways, he is justified in coming after. Oh, looks like we lost Mark here. Donald Trump is justified in some ways of coming after the media for releasing stories with unnamed sources and basically saying that his administration is in chaos. And the media should know better because he's being attacked, and Donald Trump is a counterpuncher. This is what he does. If he's attacked, he thinks in terms of brand and of saving face, and he has to attack. If he's attacked, he has to attack. And it doesn't surprise me that he's going after the media on stories where they're talking about leaks in the Trump administration, but their sources are unnamed and they have no evidence to back up their claims. So I think that he's justified in that regard, but he's not justified to completely attack the media and declare war on the media. I don't want the President of the United States to declare war on the media, and this is why the show is titled, This is a Schoolyard Brawl. That's what it looks like to me, and I'm concerned that we're going to get to the point where the President is shutting down, suing these media organizations or journalists, maybe even locking them up, and potentially even inside the media itself. It's this weird protectionism that they're trying to do to their industry, because the mainstream media now is concerned about online journalists taking some of their action and discrediting them, and so they would like to have the protections of having to get a license from the government because it controls the media. It controls the competition. It limits competition against them. So first of all, I'm not in favor of any kind of licensing, but I see it on the horizon, man. I just don't see how we can get to the point where, at least, especially during this administration here, where Trump is declaring war on the media. I feel like this is coming. What do you think, Mark? Is this around the corner?
Well, I hope not, and I don't see how it could get through any court. I mean, to license media, it's almost like to say you've got to be licensed to vote, or that's there are some circles of this country which are trying to do that, but that's another story, which I hope we get on. But that's another thing. Is that you would also ask whether or not the way of reporting news is changing, and I definitely think it is. If you look at it, I even asked somebody today on my Facebook account, which I said, what news outlets do you get? And he goes, well, I get it from my Facebook. I get it from my friends. My friends post particular articles. Those articles I read because they're kind of screened through a filtration process that I've, said, okay, you're a friend, I trust you, so I'm going to go ahead and read what it is that you're spouting out or that you're disseminating. I shouldn't say spouting out, but you know what I mean. It's like, but the problem with that is that quite often it can literally be fake. These headlines people can just make up. They can make it look like a real news story. So people have to be very critical of the type of information that they're taking in and what the sources are. Not to immediately just discredit a source. I mean, if it comes from Vox, which is very left-leaning, or if it comes from Fox, which is very right-leaning, you shouldn't necessarily just discredit it simply because you're on the opposite side.
Agreed.
But if it's coming from something like, Us Uncut or US Uncut, I don't know, sure, is it Us or US Uncut, whatever, versus Breitbart, now you can kind of see, okay, there's a pure agenda involved in a lot of these types of publications where you got to know, are you even reading a headline that's appropriate for the body of the article? And if so, is it even a news story, or is this just kind of a hit piece? Yeah. And that's where, because we have so much, I mean, with the ADD culture now, because we have so much information being disseminated to us, it's our job as responsible citizens of this country to really determine what is in fact an actual news story. And of course there's going to be bias in it, but that's not necessarily wrong. It's just like having a conflict of interest. It doesn't mean it's illegal or wrong. You just have to point that out and understand where it's coming from. NPR, I listen to that, it's going to be liberal, right?
Yeah.
So they're only going to report on things that they want me to decide on or that they really want to have out there. But for the most part, I think that they're actually being intellectually honest. They have integrity, but they're biased versus just having an agenda with no integrity.
So Thomas Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. This is kind of an alarm bell that I'm ringing right now. If we don't take this responsibility upon ourselves as citizens, as free people, to become informed and go past the headlines and also past our own echo chambers, because you mentioned something that I think is incredibly important, is the way people are getting their news are changing. People are going to Facebook and getting their news in their streams or whatever social media platform, and less people are likely to actually go directly to an outlet, I think, than are getting their news through social media. And this is one of the things that's concerning, because Facebook itself is creating echo chambers for their users, because what you like, what you look at, what the comment on, when you even if you're scrolling in your feed, what you stop on for a period of time and engage with, this algorithm is learning you, and it's giving you what you like. So the things that you don't like, the things that you scroll by really fast because it didn't reflect your worldview, maybe the news article challenged your worldview and you didn't want to read it and you just kept scrolling through, or maybe it came from an outlet that you don't trust, like the Huffington Post or something like that, you're going to get less of those things. So every post that you hit like on, every post that you look at on these platforms, you're just adding to your own echo chamber if you're only looking at the news that you want to see to reaffirm your position on something. And I think that we're going to be at a point here where we're not going to even, not that we're going to be, because right now we're shouting people down. We're not listening to each other because we're pulling a Shia LaBeouf and shouting people down. But the future is going to come to the point where we're not even hearing each other. We're not even seeing the other side's argument because it never comes across in our echo chamber. It never enters and penetrates into our echo chamber. This is why right now I'm making an effort, number one, to reach out to people on the left, on all sides of the spectrum, and talk to them about things that we can come together on, that I'm not compromising principle on. How can we shrink the government to ease your fears about the government coming after you? How can we reduce federal power and put hands back in the local, state government, or hell, even the citizens' hands? That's the first place we should start. But if we don't take time to actually go to these other news sources too and share and talk about what the other side is saying and read and listen to what they're saying, we're going to be in a hard place, because I think right now the thing that we have to do, the thing that will save us, is reconciliation and forgiveness. Even if the other side is not willing to admit their mistakes, we need to forgive them for perceived wrongs against us, and talk about how we can make sure that the government can't be used as a weapon against anyone, right or left. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, that's so true, and it's a great reminder. It's something that we should always remind ourselves in, and I do my best, especially on a platform like Facebook, when I engage in a debate, which is a lot more often than I'd like to admit, but when I do engage in that, I'll constantly say, or I'll remind, my friend on that, hey, I love you, but I disagree with you on this. And I think what we need to remind ourselves is that we all basically want the same things. It's just how do we get it, and by which means. And I think that that's the real sticking point. Is it with government intervention, and which government is it, the federal, the state, or the local government? Is it just you, your own autonomous self, your community? How is it that we can find common ground? And by engaging in these debates, it should not be about how much can I destroy you with my philosophy or with my my effervescent knowledge. It should be, how do I learn from this? How do I learn about you and about our way of life so that we can collaborate and make it better, as opposed to hitting it on head on? So it's that, getting flies with honey or vinegar. It's changing the direction of a train, either hitting it head on or getting in the car with the director of the train. How is it that what are the means to which we're achieving these common political and social goals? And that's where we tend to, and I think almost naturally, demonize the other side or anybody who disagrees with us. I even went onto a post that was very liberal, and I was really just trying to get this. This was in the most recent press conference, which was a bit of a circus, but also I smiled a little bit at the president. I was like, okay, I kind of liked him a little bit more, and then I kind of just rolled my eyes even more, going, oh my word, even worse. But at least I'm recognizing my own feelings on this, and I was looking at this, and he had mentioned how he was so disgusted with the president because of the fact that he was speaking to a black reporter, about, and the concept of the idea that the Congressional Black Caucus came up in a meeting that he wanted and asked the reporter for. And all of these people, without even listening to what Trump said, went down and just, berated him and said how horrible of a man he is because of the fact that he must be racist because he automatically assumes that the woman is black, that she knows these people from the Congressional Black Caucus. And I thought to myself, she did, right?
She even admitted that she knew some.
But she was the one that, in Donald Trump's words, she started it. It's the kind of thing where she actually asked him, have you spoken with the Congressional Black Caucus? He goes, no, I haven't actually. Do you know any of them? She goes, well, I know a few of them. He goes, set up a meeting. I'd love to have it. And that's honestly how I felt he approached it. But before, when I was reading this, it was that he singled this woman out. He belittled her to the point where he was like, well, you must know these people because you're black. And then they immediately ostracized, demonized, marginalized everything that he said after that. So he could he could win. He could not win. And that's where I think that we use this bias as a shield to not allow any information in. Kind of like what my dad would always say, Mark, you've got a mind like a steel trap. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. I might have a little bit of intellectual, background. I might have a little bit of experience. I might have a little bit of knowledge. But that's the extent of it sometimes. And if I don't open my mind out there, if I don't start talking to people who disagree with me, and, to finish that point, I engaged with this guy and I said, look, I don't see it as being racist here. I see it as him being at worst ignorant, just going, hey, do you know these people? That was just kind of an innocent question. And these people, even though, Mac, I can't stand Trump, these people attacked me simply because of the fact that I wouldn't admit that Donald Trump was a horrible, racist person at this point. And I thought to myself, well, I'm even trying to reach across to you guys and, tell you how I don't think we should hate this man. And now I'm being hated because I don't hate him.
Yeah.
And then when I go on the opposite side and try to explain how all of these, Republicans in Congress would have already had impeachment hearings right now if it were Hillary Clinton talking with the Russians, even though we don't know exactly what went on, but damn well that they would have had these types of things, these accusations being thrown out. And all of them completely say, Mark, you're so full of it. All you're doing is listening to the lame street media and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my, I can't win. I don't even know where I find a home anymore.
Yeah.
The libertarians are so small. I can't even talk with my Republican or Democratic friends anymore without being an enemy.
Yeah, and it's. I think we're getting to the point now where disagreement on a particular issue, and maybe this is just my bias and my perspective, but it means that if you disagree with me, means that, number one, you're a bad person, especially if you're on the left. I feel like that if you don't think that Donald Trump is racist, then you are yourself a racist. If you don't think Donald Trump is this, then you are yourself this. And it's ultimately, again, I spoke earlier in the first hour about virtue signaling. I think people are, well, I disagree with Trump because of this. And, even if they don't necessarily understand the issues, they are signaling to others that they're virtuous, and, that showing that I don't disagree with you, and that means that I'm a good person. Whereas people who do disagree with us, it means they're a bad person. I feel like on both sides of the aisle, this happens. Disagreement means that you are evil, you are a bad person, but I feel like it permeates further into the radical left. But perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my bias and my perception of it. Maybe it's both sides.
I definitely do think it's both sides. However, I think it's easier to argue with a conservative because a lot of times it's more on the realm of, I never even thought about it that way, versus, I'm so intellectually stimulated by my, college education, and, basically this kind of high-minded levity of, I'm so much better than you because of the fact that I have a degree in women's studies or something, and a lot of times it's emotionally based and emotionally charged. Where the right can be very similar to the left is when you're dealing with religion, whereas on the left almost everything is religious, where there's very little logic involved. It's just, this irrational, whimsical spouting off of how I feel at the moment, and you can't ever base any objectivity on it. It's all subjective. It's all how I feel today. Well, I feel you're a racist, so you're a racist, and anything you say right now is going to be racist, and you should be silenced. And that's really where I think the biggest problem is coming from, not only leadership starting at the top, Donald Trump trying to silence his critics or create enemies out of them, but on the left, you find it to be, on violence. I mean, where you're dealing with people who are trying to silence others, essentially burn the books that they're reading or writing, essentially cancel out their free speech. And that's where I think the social justice warriors need a little bit of a lesson from the free speech warriors, and both are rising. Hopefully the free speech ones, win out, because, I don't think you watched Bill Maher much, but I watched him. He had Milo Yiannopoulos on. I'm not sure if we can break into that now, but this guy, he's an editor at Breitbart. He's, I think, 34 years old. He's English. He's a gay man who only dates black men, who is an immigrant, and who is going onto these college campuses and basically, touting what it is that he believes. Berkeley just rioted. I mean, whereas if you listen or read New York Times or any very left-leaning publication, it was a, Milo Yiannopoulos, sparking outrage and protest on college campuses. They say nothing of the fact in the headline that there's massive violence and, torching of a college campus just to silence somebody. But that's the type of lengths that we're now looking at. The president trying to silence media or sue anybody he disagrees with, and then the left firebombing institutions for even allowing people to speak on their campus. It's just got to stop, and that's where, who do you turn to? Because when you're talking to the right, it's all the left's problem, and you're talking to the left, it's all the right's problem, and it's got to be somewhere in between.
So let's start with that. Do you have enough time? Are you good on time right now? Because I'd like to cut to a break and come back and talk about that. Is that good?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to start there when we come back after this break, folks. I want to talk about this Milo Yiannopoulos, and I want to actually compare this to something we talked about last week and how I feel like this is counterproductive for the left, and talk about this supposed free speech movement in the nation. So I'm going to talk more with Mark about that when we get back. You guys don't want to go anywhere.
Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign. Have you visited the On the Move with Mac Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. We are back. Thanks for sticking with us to the break. At this point, I'm bringing my good friend and friend of the show, Mark Delphine, back on the line. Hey, Mark, are you there?
I sure am.
Okay, so when we last left, we were talking about Milo
Yiannopoulos. Your white privilege is showing that.
I have this problem with
I think it's
last
Greek,
names.
isn't it? Yiannopoulos.
Isn't he white? I'm
Yiannopoulos.
pretty sure he's a white guy, right?
He's white. No, he's definitely white, but I think he's Greek. I think that name is Greek or Jewish. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's got, if you have like more than 3 syllables in your last name, I think I get a pass for messing it up. So.
You sure do. It's your show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's my show. I can mess your name up if I want to. So, and sometimes accidentally. Anyway, so with that said, I want to play the clip here. This is a outburst. This is, I believe, the show that you were talking about where Larry Wilmore called Milo or he basically said to go F himself. This was on I think Bill Maher. Is that the guy you were referring to? Bill Maher?
Yeah, this is just last Friday, right?
Okay, yeah. Let me play the clip here. You guys can hear this yourself. I don't know if this is going to beep it out or anything, but I'm going to play it. Here we go.
Say, do you always have to fight with everybody?
I don't! We were having such a nice time, but you always invite such awful people on your show.
These are not...
They're so stupid. No, come on. You need to start inviting higher IQ guests, or this is going to be a disaster.
First of all, wait.
These are very high.
Wait, hold on, Bill. You can go yourself, all right?
Yeah.
Jack, because
if this is the face of the
your argument is that these people are stupid, you didn't hear a word this man said earlier in this segment, because he can talk circles around your pathetic, douchey little ass from there.
I gotta defend my
And one last thing, and I'll let you defend it. Leslie Jones is not very literate. Go yourself again for that one.
Read her Twitter feed. She can barely spell.
She's a very thoughtful person and very funny.
All right.
You always have to fight with everybody.
I don't know why it's playing again. Hold on. There we go. All right. Hey, Mark, you there?
Yeah, I am, and you took the worst part of it. Go ahead.
I took the worst part of it? Oh, okay.
well, he had an interview with Bill Maher at the beginning where all I had heard of is just, this guy is this white supremacist, alt-right leader of Breitbart who, is a self-hater because he's gay, but he hates transgender people. I mean, I was hearing all of this, this characterization of the man from the left and not really knowing who this guy was. And so I watch Bill Maher weekly, and I watched that. And the first interview, at the very beginning of the show, I was like, wow, I think this guy is a little bit misunderstood. And then he's getting into this argument and this debate with people, and then his only real negative in that is when he's, spewed that out. He's like, oh, these people are so stupid. Why are you even bringing them on your show? Which was where he was totally out of line. I mean, Ann Coulter did the same kind of thing on the show. He's like, she had said something like, your people on here are really smart, except your audience. Your audience is really stupid. And it was kind of catty and it was funny, but that right there, I'm not sure. Go ahead. Why were you putting that on instead of the other part of his other part of his show?
Well, first of all, this is telling him to go F himself, so I thought that was interesting. And this is a clip I could find very quickly when you were talking about this interview. One of the things that I am concerned about here, okay, if Milo, because I don't know Milo. From what I've heard of his characterizations. I do think that he's alt-right. I think he's admittedly alt-right. Am I correct?
Oh, he is.
Okay.
Yes. He is, but what do you describe as alt-right versus what I hear some people call it as alt-Reich, like the Third Reich? I mean, some people call it some pretty nasty stuff, and I didn't really identify with it one way or another until I really just started lately researching it. What do you call alt-right? What's your characterization of it?
Now, there's varying degrees, obviously, just like any other any philosophy, even to include religion. You can be varying degrees of religious, but in terms of full-blown balls to the wall alt-right, we're talking about white nationalists, white supremacists, who essentially would like to create a fascist government. Using the power of the government. And again, if you're following the Leninist philosophy of Steve Bannon, you burn the system down, overwhelm the system, burn it down to create a new one. I think that is what the alt-right actually wants to do. Now, there are people, there's useful idiots on both sides, and some people who may know more about the philosophy. I happen to think that Milo is intelligent enough to understand this philosophy and what he's lining up with. In addition to, I think it's the Alexander Dugin philosophy of the fourth political turning, where they essentially want to combine all of the elements of every government that's been created, essentially socialist, communist, fascist, and capitalist. They want to combine it all into one perfect government in their eyes. But again, it's a nationalist movement. It's a nationalist, in many cases, white supremacist, white nationalist movement. Not something that I want to align myself with in any particular way whatsoever.
Who does, though, except the fringe? And that's really, when I first heard it, I heard of alternative right, where when I hear right wing, I think of sometimes super religious, super conservative to the point where I'm just not. I mean, I've been a Republican before. I'm a libertarian now. I thought of alternative right, where it was a growing number of libertarians who are coming in and changing the party, or growing from a youth movement where a lot of these on-campus, much more libertarian-leaning or socially left, fiscally right, were pushing into the right wing and changing it from within. For that, I would consider myself to be a part of. To look at the extreme of it, where you go, to me, it's almost very much just like the Tea Party. The origin of the Tea Party used to be very, very libertarian. It was very anti-war. It was very anti-government, deep government spending, bailouts, and then Obamacare. I mean, all of those rallied a whole group of people around a movement. And when it was usurped by a bunch of very religious-minded Republicans, that's when I left that movement. I was like, no, I'm done with it. So to me, the alt-right has kind of been usurped, or at least the only credit or spotlight is being given to or put on those people who are at the fringe ends of it, just to marginalize it and then to say it's over. And that's where Milo Yiannopoulos considers himself to be a libertarian, as do I think you are, and he considers himself to be a part of the alt-right. And he has never once in any of the interviews, and I've only been studying this guy for, I'd say I put in probably 3 to 5 hours of my time researching him. So I think it's more than most, but I think it's much less than what could be done. And what I've seen him be unapologetically for is a Western supremacy, not a white supremacy. And when any time we start to look at how our culture stacks up to that of, say, the Russian culture or especially the Middle Eastern culture, I would clearly say, and Bill Maher is in agreement, and so is Milo Yiannopoulos, that Western culture is better than those cultures. And when any time the left gets a hold of this and hears, oh, ours is better, then you must be a racist, you must be a white supremacist, you must be. And that's the logical conclusion that they draw from this. And that's where, when I first really started hearing a lot about alt-right, that's all I heard was just white supremacy, white supremacy. When I first thought of it, I just thought it was libertarian. When I really started researching it, it could be any number of things depending upon which group is a part of that movement. And that's where, back to the original point, we've got to really sift through this stuff and really decipher what is in fact the truth to this, instead of just taking labels and then ostracizing and marginalizing them. Let's really figure out who these people are and why are they getting attention. Because that right there is, that's something that I think, when Milo Yiannopoulos started really digging into some fact and to some real substance to what he was saying on that show, that's when that guy comes in and tells him to go F himself. Because he had no other logical response. He was losing the argument. He hated it so much. And so he basically just comes out with emotion versus more logic.
So Milo essentially won that little debate. As soon as you have to start switching to ad hominem attacks, you've lost that debate. But I
agree.
One of the things I want to point out, this I think is a different thing. This is something different. I don't think this is, and granted, I don't know Milo and I don't know his heart, but I do know the philosophy surrounding the alt-right. I have been diving deep into their philosophy, and I'm talking to them. Again, I've had tons of interactions with these guys on the alt-right. A lot of these guys, and again, a lot of the philosophy surrounding the alt-right is not the philosophy surrounding the Libertarian Party. It doesn't stem from the non-aggression principle. It's not pro-liberty. It, in fact, is anti-liberty. It stems from essentially the philosophy from the Traditionalist Workers' Party, which is anti-Jew, anti-immigrant, anti-free trade, and pro-central planning. These are, and again, one of the things that you noted here that I really would like to touch on is the idea of cultural supremacy. I wholeheartedly and fundamentally disagree with your point that American culture is supreme to any other culture, not because we don't have the best system over here or something like that. It's because cultures can change. I want you to look at just in the last 8 years during the Barack Obama administration. We have changed so much just on the issue of gay marriage, and cultures can change dramatically based on public opinion. And there's nothing wrong with cultures changing, and in fact, I think it's a good idea, and it's good that we have become more accepting in that regard. But one of the things that I'm concerned about is us putting the emphasis on the culture rather than the principles. America is great because of our principles, because we believe in limited small government, and that was what we were doing here. This was an experiment in government. And the whole idea of our government was to protect life, liberty, and property, not to act against it. That's what makes America great. That's what makes us supreme. But not because we are better as a people or our culture is just better as a people, and we apply these things based on basically a scale of what is something that we can't really measure. It's based just on our judgment and our feelings and emotion. Again, I think that is a leftist argument. What my argument here is that we are better because of our values, because we try to be free. We have tried to create a government that protects our liberty instead of violates our liberty or is used as a weapon to violate other people's liberty. And one of the points that I would just like to point out here, Milo was recently shut down with riots at, what college was that? Was that Berkeley? I think it was UC Berkeley. Yeah. That's what I thought. He was recently shut down from speaking in front of an audience of what couldn't have been more than a couple hundred people. And that riot was attempted to shut him down, to silence his speech. Again, even if he was a full-fledged white supremacist Nazi, even if he's up there, giving Hitler salutes and he's got a little Hitler mustache on and a Nazi uniform, even if he's doing all of that stuff, let the man speak.
They gave him more. They gave him more press and more almost credibility amongst his supporters, simply because of the tactics that they resorted to. And when you're saying protest, or when you're saying they wouldn't allow him to speak, I'm not sure if you saw the video footage of this. This is a full-on riot.
Yes,
they firebombed. They smashed in windows. They turned over cars. They broke gates. This is the type of activity that, I'm still a very big opponent of Donald Trump's. I am not a fan of this guy, but what has really turned me off from a lot of my friends on the left is this type of either condonement or silent condemnation. Like, they're just, well, we don't necessarily like it, but we're just going to be quiet about it because they happen to agree with us, or they don't we don't like Milo. And that to me is where this whole the basis of what the United States and what makes the United States a supreme nation, or in my opinion, the greatest nation in the history of this world, is just that. It turned the individual state dynamic on its head. It said the individual is at the top and the state is here to support it, versus the reverse, where we are sacrificial lambs of the state, and our means to the end is simply, or the end is the state, whereas we are, our bodies, our lives, our souls are here to support that state. And that is where the United States has reversed that. Back to just really quickly, when you're talking about cultural supremacy versus principle supremacy, or what we're founded on, what our Constitution says, I do agree that yes, our principles of what made this country the best, and most countries that follow in those principles do see prosperity. But I also, and I will wholeheartedly disagree with you, there are, just as this man has mentioned, 11 countries in this world that will cut my head off because I'm gay. There are multiple countries that have genital mutilation for women, that require them to cover their heads, if not their entire bodies. They don't let them drive. They don't let them vote. That arrange their own marriages. That culture is inferior. That might be my opinion, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it because I don't hurt people's feelings. Our culture, regardless, even though we didn't allow gays to marry, we're still not publicly beheading them in a big square. So our culture here, even though I would still say our principles are better than our culture, in other words, our words are better than our actions sometimes, but our culture is still superior to that of even, say, Russia, who will, basically, jail you for writing something bad about the president, or who treats gays and who treats women substandard, or who treats Jews like they're second-class citizens. The Russian culture is inferior, in my opinion, to that which everything that we pretty much stand for in terms of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I find our culture and our Constitution to be superior. So we can debate that back and forth, but I agree with you at least on the principles of this country, which has made it the greatest. I just disagree with you that our culture is not also superior, and I'm talking Western, not just the United States.
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that our culture isn't better in a lot of ways, but the issue here is that when we're talking about one culture difference being different from another, and I'm not for relativism, cultural relativism, or moral relativism. Like, we can't judge people based on them being from a different culture. I absolutely disagree. I judge people based upon the non-aggression principle. Are you hurting others? Are you taking their stuff? This is the way I judge you. But that's a principle. The non-aggression principle is a principle. And if my idea is that America is culturally supreme to everyone else, that's a principle. And that's the issue that I have is making the cultural supremacy your principle. It's not that our culture is better, it's that our principles are better. And we can't blur the lines between what is a principle and just something that we feel that is good, that we don't really have any standard standards, because this is an abstract thing to talk about a culture. What are the elements inside the culture? What are the principles of the culture? And again, cultures can change. Just if I say today America is better than the Middle East, and suddenly something happens and it's not better than the Middle East, Sharia law takes over here, and suddenly there's a reformation of Islam in the Middle East. It could be different. We could be different.
Sure.
We could start killing people.
Sure, but things can change, and then I can say it's no longer superior. Again, I mean, it is subjective, and I think we are just dealing with semantics here. But I wanted to get that out there, that that the results, what it is that I mean, you can ascribe to something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in action you're going to to play that out. But either way, if I'm looking at it from that basis, I look at it, and that's where you get all of these people who are like down with Islamophobia, and you can't. You're going to be a racist if you say something negative about radical Islam or even about Islam in general. I mean, that's where I think that people like Milo Yiannopoulos are so important. Whether or not I agree with them, but they're going out there and they're risking essentially their lives for freedom of speech. And I think it's so necessary for people on the left and the right to support those rights, regardless of whether or not you agree with them. So people like Bill Maher and Jerry Seinfeld, comedians, will no longer go onto college campuses, even though most of those college campuses, I mean, Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Maher are very left-leaning, if not very liberal. And they won't even go onto college campuses, which are very left-leaning or liberal for the most part, simply because of the fact that they'll get booed. They'll get booed because these people are so pretentious and they're so superficial with how, you have to be so protective of every single, category that we place people into. And they're the biggest hypocrites where they don't want to be labeled, they don't want to be categorized, they want everybody to be open-minded, but yet they will silence their critics, they will stop at nothing to burn the books that people are reading. And that's where this type of a free speech movement needs to supersede this social justice warrior movement. And that's, I'm most certainly on that end of the spectrum when it comes to we've got to protect that freedom of speech because it's getting ludicrous out there. Agreed. With safe spaces and trigger warnings and college campuses which are protecting, quote unquote, everybody who might somehow be offended by something. This is where I applaud the University of Chicago that said, garbage with all of that. We are here to challenge your beliefs. We are here to stretch your comfort zone. And you are here to learn from us. We are not here to adhere to your list of demands, kids. And that's really what they are until they start turning into barbarians like you saw at Berkeley.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like, as you said, and it was an excellent point, by shouting him down, by engaging in riots and destroying property and just trying to silence somebody in general. And we can look at what happened with Senator Elizabeth Warren last week on the Senate floor, where she was silenced from trying to read a letter. And look, they used Rule 19 to shut her down. If you would have just let her speak, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Barely anybody would have talked about it. It wouldn't have been in the forefront of American consciousness. But yet, when you try to silence people, you end up having the opposite effect. You end up... Milo, he was going to talk to a couple hundred people. It was a nationwide news story that millions of people heard about that story now. You've only upped his audience. You've actually hurt what you were trying to do. You tried to silence him. He got a bigger microphone. So this is... First of all, trying to silence people doesn't work, and it's immoral. We should not be trying to shut people down. We should encourage them to speak, even if it's racist, even if we find it abhorrent, because that's the only speech that actually needs protecting anyway. Nobody's going to go around and worry about shutting down speech that everyone already agrees with. This is why we got the First Amendment in the first place. And I hope there is a freedom of speech movement in this nation. I just don't see it. I think people on both sides of the aisle are waiting to shut people down.
Yeah, it's sad, but I think, we should take the lesson from Iran and the Ayatollah who banned Salman Rushdie and Satanic Verses, and it became a worldwide bestseller. I mean, it's just like, you better be careful what you wish for, because sometimes, it turns out to be the exact opposite.
Plus, people want what they can't get. If you're told do not listen to this, a lot of people are going to want to listen to it.
Yeah, don't stick your hand in that cookie jar. And, just to kind of wrap up when it comes to Milo Yiannopoulos, his first real entrance into major publicity was the fact that he was banned from Twitter. He had something like 350,000 followers on Twitter. He gets out there, and I think it's Leslie Jones who was on the new Ghostbusters movie, where the four ladies were the head cast of that movie.
That movie was
the movie bombed. He made some really bad, he called, said that the cast of the four women were fat, ugly, and fat. It's mean spirited. It's a little callous. It's a little, backyard school bully kind of thing. But it's nothing that a journalist has never said about a celebrity before. And Milo considers himself a journalist. Leslie Jones is a celebrity. All of a sudden it kind of took on a life of its own, as do a lot of Facebook debates, as do a lot of Twitter feeds, and you started to see, people getting out of control and starting really to say majorly racist things about Leslie Jones, who's black. And, he condemned that, but he was banned from Twitter because of the fact that he incited this type of mean-spirited behavior. And this is where I call out and condemn Twitter for silencing free speech. The beauty of it was that it could take over a life of its own, and that people could say anything they wanted to as long as it was within 160 characters or less. And that's where this got a major blowback, is that he came on to national prominence because of that starting that way. And then it got escalated, magnified because of how the students at Berkeley interpreted that. And so, if Twitter would have never said anything, and if Berkeley hadn't done anything like that, I would never know who this guy is.
Yeah.
And now I'm almost a fan. Not of everything the guy says. He is a Trump supporter. But it is the kind of thing where, this is a guy that just calls it out like he sees it. And you know what? I like that because, I can even pull out a few, if Donald Trump were a journalist, I would probably like him, even though I wouldn't necessarily believe everything that he wrote. The fact that he's the president and he's spouting off just absolute unrealistic statistics about his inauguration or about, the number of electoral votes that he gets, or about, terrorist attacks that never occurred. This is the type of thing that we need to be very careful with when it comes to our president, who shouldn't just have that carte blanche freedom of, expression that, he doesn't think before he speaks. That is dangerous when it comes to our allies, when it comes to our foreign policy, when it comes to even our domestic policy and how the president relates to our media and to Congress. This is a man who not only spouts out just fantasy, ideas, but regurgitates things that he sees on news outlets as actual fact, and then continues the lie when he knows that it's been refuted. And that's where people have got to remember there's a difference between a freedom of press and a president who's just spouting out lies just because of the fact that he doesn't like what the press is reporting.
Yeah, so I want to move and switch gears here. I want to play a clip here from Bernie Sanders talking about Donald Trump and other things as well. But he called Donald Trump a pathological liar. I kind of want to chop this up a little bit with you, Mark. Do you have some more time?
I sure do.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go ahead and play this clip real fast and listen.
And joining me now is one of the leaders of...
Listen to what Bernie Sanders has to say about Donald Trump being a pathological liar. This is on NBC News. I believe this is Chuck Todd asking the questions. Here we go.
Of the Democratic Party these days, though he's actually still not technically a member of the Democratic Party. It's Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Senator Sanders, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good to be with you.
Let me start on the travel ban and immigration in general. And let me ask the question to you this way. Do you think the current procedures that we have to vet refugees, to vet folks that are coming into this country, do you think it needs to be improved? Do you think it is a safety risk right now?
Well, I think that the vetting mechanisms we have now are very, very strong. If anybody has an idea as to how we can make them stronger, let's go forward. I don't think there's any debate, whether you're progressive, conservative, or anybody else, that we want to keep the United States safe, and we want to be 100% clear that anybody who comes into this country should not be coming into this country to do us harm. But what you just heard Mr. Miller say is a shell game. While there's a whole lot of discussion about the racist, in my view, immigration policies of the Trump administration, which are based on anti-Muslim ideology, which are doing us enormous harm all over the world, something else is going on at the exact same moment. And that President Trump is backtracking on every economic promise that he made to the American people when he told workers and senior citizens he was not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So what's going on right now, we're talking a whole lot about immigration. He is appointing Wall Street bankers, the same people he told us he would oppose to very high positions. Gary Cohn has gotten the $250 million severance package from Goldman Sachs. He's now the main financial advisor. So we're talking a whole lot about dividing the American people up. We're supposed to hate Muslims. We're supposed to hate Latinos. We're supposed to hate
blacks. You think all of this is a shiny metal object? You think all of this is a shiny metal object right now to distract the public, divide the public?
You got it. Meanwhile, he was going to clean the swamp. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Well, guess who's running the swamp right now? The same exact Wall Street guys from Goldman Sachs who were there in the past. So we're all talking about who do we hate tomorrow? Is it the Muslims? Okay. Is it Latinos? Who are we supposed to hate? And let's remember, when Mr. Trump some years ago helped lead the birther effort to undermine the legitimacy of the first African-American president in our history, it was trying to divide us up. And what I say to the American people, stay focused. Stay focused. Do you want billionaires and Wall Street executives to be running this economy, or do we want economic policies that work for working families and the middle class? Where is...
Okay, so before we continue with the rest of this here, I just have to tear into some of this stuff, and I'm sure, Mark, you probably have some things you'd like to say about this as well. But let me just point out here, in this short portion of this interview we've already listened to so far, he's already acknowledged that the United States does have a right to vet to make sure that the people coming into the country don't want to kill us. However, he claimed that these policies from the Trump administration were based on anti-Muslim ideology and that they were racist immigration policies. So let me touch on that one for a moment. I've already covered it for a second, but these policies are not anti-Muslim, as I have said over and over to infinitum since we've been talking about this. These 7 countries were 7 countries of concerns that were identified from a law signed into law from the Obama administration. These 7 nations have high threats from terrorism, and it's evident that it's not anti-Muslim because they miss the most populated Muslim nations on earth, to include Indonesia, which is the most populated Muslim country on earth. So it's not anti-Muslim. It's from a list created by the Obama administration, or at least passed by the Obama administration, signed into law by them, and this had absolutely nothing to do with being Muslim nations. These are Muslim nations that have high threat of terrorism. And first of all, it's not based on an anti-Muslim ideology. If it was, I'm telling you right now, I'd stand alongside you, Bernie. I promise you I would, or anybody on the left that is concerned about people being thrown in concentration camps or being, denied a right of a religious right. We do have a religious freedom here. Even if you disagree with somebody's religion, they should be allowed to practice it as long as they're harming no one. And there's a difference between, practicing your religion to yourself, by yourself, and practicing Sharia law where you think you have a right to throw a gay man off a roof because he's gay. That's a big difference. And for that, I will tell you, I don't support that, and I think that the government is there to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. But let's talk about this whole thing that he's talking about, how Donald Trump wants you to hate Muslims and Latinos. The big thing that I'm seeing here is we're arguing now over who to hate. This side wants you to hate Muslims and Latinos, apparently, and Bernie Sanders is saying we should instead hate bankers, CEOs, and billionaires. Now, we're not talking about what we're for. We're talking about who we're against. Mark, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, it's politics of division, and Bernie Sanders is very good at that because he believes that the 99% versus the 1% are going to be the the sides that people can take, and that he feels like the numbers are on his side. One, the only reason why I will give any credit to what Bernie Sanders is saying is simply because of the fact that Donald Trump campaigned on division, saying that he has a full-out ban. Like, he started with a full-out ban of all Muslims entering the country. Then he recanted, then he went ahead and reset it again, then he recanted it again, and now in his action, his executive order, while yes, it was an Obama, Obama started it, it was the fact that he signed this as an executive order, which was fodder for the media, because all of these nations were Muslim majority. Now they're being labeled as Muslim majority, so that's the headline. That's the catalyst. That's the teaser there. So people on the left, this is very much, while it's not nearly as dangerous to say, it's very much the same type of thing that says, if Donald Trump wants to cut taxes on everybody, all Bernie Sanders is going to say is that he just wants to cut taxes on the top 1% of 1%, even though they're included in everybody. So it's very misleading, but Donald Trump campaigned on this. That's why I'm saying Donald Trump has to be very careful about what he says. This isn't his company anymore. This is, he's no longer the CEO of his company. He is now the President of the United States, where his words are taken as reality, as what they should be taken as, which is what he meant to say. And so when he's saying that he's campaigning on this division of banning Muslims, and then he goes out and his action bans immigrants and or refugees from Muslim majority countries, people on the left see that as, he said he's going to do it, and now he's doing it. So while that executive order in its entirety in the way that it is, I didn't necessarily disagree with it. I can clearly see why people like Bernie Sanders, who are in the business of politics of division, can jump on that, and legitimately so, because Donald Trump campaigned on banning Muslims.
I agree,
So,
and it does make it look like this is what he was doing, and even we can go so far as with Rudy Giuliani saying that Trump came to him and said, "I want a full Muslim ban. I want you to figure out how to get it done legally." And look, if that's what happened, there's a difference between what happened and what is implemented. And this is my point, is that, look, I first of all, I think that we should be a lot harsher on our checks on people, our vetting with people coming in from these places. If again, you and I, we've already had this discussion in pretty thorough detail, and from what I understand, we agree on this. So
I don't disagree. We need to be the job of the United States government, especially in military, is to protect its people from foreign invaders. Mm-hmm. And when we are specifically intending on bringing in people from foreign countries that are from these countries that we've bombed and that we've instigated and blowback, whether or not you agree with our involvement in them, we should be much, much more, stringent about who we bring in and how we ascertain that knowledge.
Agreed.
So more stringent is better, than just going, these people are without a home. Yeah, my heart goes out to them. I've seen these documentaries of Syria and how much of a disaster a once civilized nation, for the most part, was, and now it's just, it's a series of tombstones. It's horrible. So my heart goes out to these people. I'm not against immigration, nor am I against letting in refugees. But just like you and I think, discussed, we've got to be very careful about letting in refugees who are from countries that have vowed to kill us, and in fact, worse, that we've killed many of their own people. They've got to be a little bit upset about that, and rightfully
if there is
so.
a problem within a particular religion of radicalism and jihadism, which there is within Islam, we would be foolish not to acknowledge it. That's denying reality. There is a fragment of this religion that would like to see us dead, and as a result, we should be more careful in who we allow into our country from these countries of concern. I don't have any issue with the way that the executive order was, what it was trying to accomplish in the letter of the law. Now the spirit, I don't know what Donald Trump, how he would have implemented it, or what his thought process was behind it. But here we got more from Bernie Sanders. Here is the rest of this clip.
Discussion about raising the minimum wage to a living wage, pay equity for women.
Let me ask you this, Senator. We've seen a lot of anti-Trump activism over the last 3 weeks. Once again, every Saturday of his presidency so far, we've seen some protests. There's a lot of energy in the progressive movement. But there's a lot of debate about what Democrats should do about it. First of all, do you believe this is a Tea Party for the left? And if so, what lessons did you learn in 2009 that you think can be learned by the Democrats now?
No, it's not a Tea Party, because the Tea Party was essentially funded by the billionaire Koch brothers family. This is a spontaneous and grassroots uprising of the American people. And let me just mention to you, Chuck, and you may be the first to hear this. On February 25th, 2 weeks from yesterday, there is in fact going to be rallies all over this country. And I think you're going to see people in conservative areas, in progressive areas, asking the Republicans, what are you going to do when you throw 20 million people off of health insurance? How many of them are going to die? What's your plan? What are you going to do when you raise prescription drug costs on average $2,000 for senior citizens? Are you going to really repeal the protection against pre-existing conditions, so that people who have cancer or heart disease will no longer be able to get insurance? You're going to throw kids off their parents' health insurance program. Republicans are going to have to start answering those questions, and the American people are pretty clear. Overwhelmingly, they want to improve the Affordable Care Act. They do not want to simply repeal it.
All right, let me ask you a question. Some of your former staffers, including Nick Brana, has a Draft Bernie for a People's Party movement. Essentially, they want to start a new political party. In this statement, it said this: despite Bernie Sanders' monumental endeavor to bring people into the Democratic Party, people are leaving it by the millions. The collective efforts to reform the party cannot stem the tide of people who are going independent, let alone expand the Democratic base. What do you say to those efforts?
Well, I say two things. Right now, we are in a pivotal moment in American history. We have a president who is delusional in many respects, a pathological liar, somebody who is trying to divide us
words.
Up.
Can you work with a pathological liar?
Well, it makes life very difficult, not just for me. And I don't mean, I know it is very harsh, but I think that's the truth. When somebody goes before you and the American people say 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in the last election, nobody believes that. There is not the scintilla of evidence. What would you call that remark? It's a lie. It's a delusion. But second of all, to answer your question, I think what we need to do right now is focusing on bringing the American people together around a progressive agenda. American people want to raise the minimum wage. They want to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. They want the wealthiest people in this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. They want the United States to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a right.
So if the Democratic Party is...
Okay, so I have got a lot to say on that. What do you... first of all, I'll let you get the first word in. Go ahead, Mark.
He just rambles. I mean, he has the same talking points over and over again. A little bit of me was inspired by Bernie Sanders just because he came out of nowhere and he was really talking, really from his heart. And I didn't agree with most of his social policies or his fiscal policies, but he was a bit of fresh air. Now he's just kind of hot wind. I mean, he's just touting off these same type of talking points, but he is absolutely correct in that. The president from day one who is lying about his inauguration size and who's lying about his electoral college, landslide or exaggerating, and then he's, lying about this type of voter fraud, which is, he was all the way through the entire campaign lying about how the system is rigged. And, unless, of course, he wins. I mean, this is dangerous. And the reason why I was so upset that he won is because he's campaigning on this type of division and dangerous lies that so many of his supporters agree with.
So
and then he's getting his information.
One of the claims that he made in this video is that the Tea Party wasn't grassroots, and because it was funded by Koch brothers. But he's calling these anti-Donald Trump protests or riots really spontaneous and grassroots. Although we have evidence that Soros has been funding them, and they're busing paid protesters in.
Sure, and it's going to happen to both. I mean, you have opportunists on both sides. Both of them, I believe, were grassroots. I don't think that women's march was paid for or started by George Soros. I think it was started by a woman in Hawaii, and a bunch of people were already upset, and they got together. But then you see an opportunist like George Soros who goes, wait a minute, how far can we take this thing? And so they have means, they have resources, they throw those means and resources at a movement like this, and then it clouds the message, and then it starts to divert. And then I think we've talked about how the Tea Party.
The Tea Party was co-opted, and they're co-opted, but this is being co-opted almost immediately by the left and these billionaires.
Sure.
And Bernie's saying that that this is a grassroots organization. This is complete and total astroturf. And first of all, I find it a little bit insulting that they would insult our intelligence like that. They've got the same issues going on, and again. It was co-opted. The Tea Party was co-opted, and that was a negative thing. That's why a lot of people stopped caring about what the Tea Party was doing. But another thing I want to point out here is he said that he's complaining about if we were to repeal Obamacare. He's like, what are you going to do about the rising prices for Medicare and for health care and all this other stuff for this minority of people? But what about the rising prices for everyone else that now has their insurance that's doubled or tripled? Their deductibles have gone through the roof. They've made it so, first of all, even if you can't afford health care, you're now taxed or penalized, depending on how they look at it, at the end of the year because you couldn't afford to get a product.
You're not anymore. Trump just he mentioned that the IRS is not going to penalize you for that anymore.
Has that been enacted?
But the problem with all of that is that people aren't. If you don't have an individual mandate where people have to purchase it, then insurance companies are going to go bankrupt because they're only going to be insuring people with pre-existing conditions, which is essentially a guaranteed law.
It's impossible to do what he wants to do with the redistribution of wealth, and everyone's going to get covered according to Donald Trump without having a mandate. This is just the way this stuff works. Otherwise, we're just going to continue deficit spending and going further and further into debt with a single-payer healthcare system.
Yeah, I think that's what you're going to get to, though. I think the Republicans are going to really reverse on their own philosophy and their own ideology, and they're going to capitalize on the idea that more and more Americans are looking towards a single payer because it's getting so expensive, and they feel like rich people should just go ahead and pay for their health insurance now. And unfortunately, it's going to get to that. Obamacare became such a mess, and it almost looks as though it was diagrammed as such, so that the next step invariably is going to be a universal health care system versus returning it back to the private sector.
Absolutely. Jonathan Gruber, the architect of Obamacare, has already said that the American voters, you can blame it on the American voters' stupidity for getting this through, but they've essentially built this program to collapse in order to pave the way for single-payer health care, which is exactly what's going to happen. We're going to get rid of Obamacare and replace it with Trump care. It's going to be worse. We're going to deficit spend out the wazoo. So I want to move on here from this story here, and I have one other thing that I would like to talk about before we wrap up the show today. There is a article here that I'm sure you've got quite a bit to talk about on this, Mark. The University of Wisconsin is saying that their student government is demanding free tuition for black students. I was just curious, what do you think about this, Mark?
Oh, I think black students should get free tuition. Just kidding. No, I mean, I don't even know why we're even on this, because it's like, we should go, because it just, kind of even just tackling the subject is almost feeding the fire of it, almost like, burning down UC Berkeley because Indianapolis wants to speak. It's like, if I don't believe in free tuition, there's no free lunch, there's no free ride. However, I do have to say, I have a lot of student loans, and I told a friend this, and almost in jest, but actually I wouldn't be lying too much, that if Trump somehow wipes out everybody's student loans and created it from scratch, and this is where scholarships need to be applied for, loans from private institutions, financial aid from those from the colleges themselves, I think you would have, not only will I look at Donald Trump as a much better president because I have so many student loans, but it is something to me that, it's the government and students who are borrowing money for degrees that are not going to get them anything or anywhere. And in fact, I think a lot of these students, and Milo mentioned this at one of his campuses, I think it was at University of New Mexico, where he had said a lot of these people going into some of these general liberal studies, women's studies, cultural diversity studies types of things, go in there reasonably intelligent and come out way dumber than what they went into. So, of course, I do not agree with free tuition for anybody, but and, I know a lot of people, including myself, are going to be spending the rest of our lives paying down this debt. And that was my debt, you know what I mean? I agree with it. But it is the kind of thing where I understand that this is a major concern for people because college tuition is getting so expensive, just as medical care, health care.
Well, the
it's
reason
not a
why
coincidence.
These tuitions are outpacing inflation year after year is because of the amount of government involvement and the amount of trying to make it easier for people to be able to afford college. I'll tell you this, if they want to make it easier for us to afford it, they need to leave it the hell alone and let the free market...
I couldn't agree more.
So forgiveness on these student loans, I think, is a bad idea. I'm 100% ideologically opposed against giving anyone handouts, period, especially based on the color of their skin. But this activist, in the student government, they're demanding that blacks be given free housing, free tuition, because blacks were legally barred from education during slavery, and the university remains out of reach for black students today. That's what they said on Wednesday. So this to me is... I think it's frustrating. Anyone calling for reparations, let's be clear, during slavery, no one was alive that is alive today. You were not denied access to education. You were not harmed as an individual. Now, you can claim that one group of people culturally has maybe systemically been suffering as a result of it. But let's also point out that no one alive today is responsible, and you're not entitled to their wealth. So claiming that you're entitled to some kind of reparations for historical wrongdoings in the past, I think violates the principle of all men or women are created equal. If you disagree, let's just point out, if you think that it's okay to take money from one person and give it to another, then you do not believe that all men are created equal. And this is where we need to start from. We can't start looking through the prism of history and say, well, your people wronged my people. Again, I think what we need to do is, in order to get out of this mess that we're in now, is focus on reconciliation, softening our tone, understanding each other, and trying to find areas where we can compromise instead of trying to talk about handouts to each other and who victimized who and how we can try to target that person and hate that person. We need to come together. But that's all the time we got for today, Mark. We actually got to cut the show early. I really appreciate you joining me. Did you have any final thoughts that you'd like to say, man?
Yeah, get involved, but read a lot more. We really need people at the grassroots. I belong to an organization called the Libertarian Leadership Academy, which is a training organization for libertarian-minded people. They basically have to sign the non-aggression principle. You got to be a member of the Libertarian Party National. But what we do is we train you at a local and at a state level on how to win those types of elections. City council on your local water board and, land use, the types of things that, from a real grassroots perspective, we can really start getting involved. You got to shake hands, you got to kiss babies. Well, you probably shouldn't kiss babies. But the point is that you've got to get out there, press the flesh, meet people, pound the pavement, and we help you with that. We help you learn how to better raise money, learn how to, really effectively be on point and stick with a message that resonates with people and keeping it simple. So if you want to learn more about that, that's at libertarianleadership.org, and we're starting the academy coming up within the next month. But it is, it's definitely a way to get yourself involved, especially if you've never been involved in the process before. And while I do think that this is a really dangerous time that we're in, I think the better is going to come out of it. I do think that we're really, hopefully this is a blip in the situation and that this is something that, it's going to get a little worse before it gets better, but I do believe in my heart of hearts that it's going to get better.
I hope so, man. I hope you're right. But everybody, please check out his website. What was that website again?
libertarianleadership.org.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much for joining us again, Mark. I hope you'll come back on again real soon, okay, bud?
My pleasure, always. Thanks,
all right.
Matt.
All right, take it easy. All right, folks, that's our show for today. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. And MacPack, shout out to you. You're the tip of the spear. Again, shout out to Mark Delphine. Thanks so much for joining me, Mark. And don't forget to tune in next week. We got a big show planned for next week as well. I'm already working on some of that stuff, so you guys aren't going to want to miss that. Don't forget to subscribe to us on youtube.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.